Senator Hannan to refine what the governor gave us as a basic template. When the dust settled, we had added $500 million, $500 million more dollars, and a whole series of specifics. And we also had added a 12-member drinking water council made up of members with expertise in toxicology and health risk assessment, environmental engineering, water supply, to advise and give guidance to the expenditure of these precious. Rockefeller's model for embarrassing the federal government was very much in my mind as we went through the process, because Governor Rockefeller had shown that it is possible to add a bit of self-consciousness to the mischief that sometimes too often, perhaps, is what happens in Washington. But when the budget was finalized, and we had a three-way agreement with the governor, the majority leader, who by the way is a senator from this area, John Flanagan, and the Speaker of the Assembly, who by the way is a graduate of this great university, Carl Hastie. We had something that I think we can all take heart from. There's not a lot that's in the news that we can take heart from on the environment lately, but this is part of the news, and I think you can take heart. Let me tell you some of the things that are in the $2.5 billion allocation. $1 billion for a 2017 Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. $245 million for water quality improvement projects. $200 million for New York City watershed projects. $150 million for the Intermunicipal Water Infrastructure Grant Program. $110 million for source water protection for land, using land as it should be used, which is part of the natural infrastructure that protects water. I fought for that, and I'm pleased that that is now a part of this allocation. $130 million for mitigation and remediation of contaminated drinking water. $75 million for upgrades and replacements of septic systems and cesspools. Dr. Goldberg, thank you. You were very much in mind as we did that piece, and the work of your colleagues here in this great center of research. So thank you. And $20 million for the replacement of lead drinking water service lines. We're particularly concerned about schools in that regard. And $50 million for green infrastructure grants. We handed all of this money over to the Departments of Health and the Department of Environmental Conservation, and we began our search for drinking water quality council members. They are now largely, if not completely, appointed. The first meeting took place appropriately, I think, given the quality of the research on this topic that has come out of this department and this unit of the campus. The first meeting took place last month in the Wong Center here on campus. The next meeting is scheduled for this next month. So take heart. New York, continuing in the tradition of Nelson Rockefeller, is still a national leader on this, and we are putting our money where our mouth is, and we intend to make sure that our citizens are protected, that the health and well-being of our children is protected, that they can continue to invest their life energies into staying and contributing to the pageant and narrative of history that is the great Empire State. Thank you for inviting me here this evening.
We'll just move along with the panelists and hold questions sort of till the end of the entire thing. If you have any
A few more minutes. I'd like to leave at the last possible minute. Okay, thank you.
Okay. We can always jump in with a couple of questions. I know. So next I want to introduce Supervisor Ed Romaine. Mr. Romaine is Brookhaven Town's 70th supervisor, having been elected to that office during special election in 2012 and re-elected for 2 full-year terms in 2013 and 2015. Mr. Romaine began his career in public service as a history teacher in the Hauppauge School District, where he taught for 10 years. In 1980, he entered public service as the town of Brookhaven's first Commissioner of Housing and Community Development and was later appointed Director of Economic Development. From 1986 to 89, he served as a member of the Suffolk County Legislature. He established a record as a fighter for the environment by authorizing Suffolk's first Clean Water Act. In 1989, he was elected Suffolk County Clerk, where he served for 16 years. In 2005, Ed Romaine was again elected to the county legislature, representing the 1st legislative district, and re-elected in 2007, 9, and 11. As county legislature, Mr. Romaine preserved countless acres of open space across eastern Brookhaven, the North Fork, and Shelter Island. He sponsored numerous pieces of landmark legislation, including Michael's Law, which banned explosive fuel gels, the state's first local law to regulate helicopter traffic, and established the LIPA Oversight Commission. As supervisor, Mr. Romaine has championed environmental and quality of life issues in Brookhaven Town. During the first year in office as supervisor, Ed Romaine spearheaded legislation that will forever protect the Carmans River. Under the supervisor's leadership, Brookhaven Town was named a Tree City USA in 2016 and 2017. Brookhaven received nearly $1 million in state grants in 2016 to work on major environmental projects that directly impact Long Island. Mr. Romaine continues to pioneer environmental programs that serve to better Brookhaven Town, including Citizen Ranger, townwide cleanup days, and Explore the Estuary. He brought single-stream recycling to Brookhaven in 2014, making the town a leader in this technology on Long Island. Ed Romaine earned a BA in history from Adelphi University and a master's in history from Long Island University. He resides in Center Marches with his wife, Diane. Thank you.
1,000 acres in the Commons River watershed, and the town made a major commitment to start buying land, parcel at a time, one parcel at a time, and we also expanded the area in the Commons River to the core pine barrens. That helped out. We also have a conservation and management plan that adopted more stringent sewage treatment requirements for anyone in the watershed. We also put together a performance committee, and as I said before, we expanded the core area of the Pine Barrens to include much of the Commons River watershed. One of the things that we did, and we're the only town that I know of to date, back in 2016, I drafted legislation that said if you're going to build, and I had to choose an arbitrary number, I chose 500 feet. If you're going to build within 500 feet of any body of water in the town of Brookhaven, including Lake Ronkonkoma or Lake Panamoka, you will have to put in an alternative denitrification system that will meet standards. The standards I chose, based on a lot of advice I got from people, was 8 milligrams per liter of nitrogen. Fortunately, the county could not adhere to that standard and suggested a standard of 19. I wasn't happy with that, but we have to work with our partners in the county. I think you can achieve a standard lower than 19 milligrams per liter, but that was better because a cesspool or septic, you're getting about 60 milligrams per liter of nitrogen. So any standard that lowers nitrogen, in my book, works. I'm a pragmatist. So that applies to all new construction or renovation of anyone within 500 feet. Now let me tell you what my plan is. I know great things sometimes come with a boom. Sometimes they come with a foot in the door. And we are in the process of implementing that plan now. We have a watershed management plan that's drafted for all the affected waters. And some of the other things we worked on, I mentioned, shellfish culture facility at Mount Sinai, or wetlands permitting, which we do townwide. If you're going to build anywhere near a wetland in town of Brookhaven, you've got to come see us. We've talked about the IA system for the sanitary systems. We've already installed one at our rec center in Shoreham, the Robert Reed Rec Center. We are installing one at Corey Beach, and we've made a commitment to install one now at West Meadow Beach and Sand Street Beach. And as we get time, because again, the town, like every municipality, is stretched in terms of staffing, we will retrofit all of the bathrooms in our parks for these systems. It's something we want to do, and we're taking a look at even retrofitting the town hall, which has its own sewage treatment plant. We're partnering with the USGS and the Central Pine Barrens Commission to monitor all of our surface waters. We do testing of all of our surface waters. We're working on an eelgrass restoration, which I think is critical, with Cornell Cooperative Extension. We're doing new continuous water quality monitoring equipment, which we've placed in the Commons River, and we're partnering with Islip, Smithtown, Suffolk County. Of course, back there, Legislator Kennedy, give a wave. We need partners in county government on Lake Ronkonkoma. And I know this gentleman runs the boat that tests the water in Lake Ronkonkoma for Stony Brook, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, doing a great job. We'll find a solution for that lake. Because you know what? When I was a kid, I used to swim in that lake. And now no one can swim in that lake. And that's something that we should not only be ashamed of, but address. And we've installed fish passages on Swan River, Commons River, and Peconic River, because we want to see the fish swim all the way up. and spawn where they used to. What needs to be done? The list is so long. I had to cut this list down, and I've talked too long. Why don't we just flash it up and I don't have to talk, because you can figure it out. But we definitely need, and I'm on the Long Island Regional Planning Board, and we have a Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan that needs to be implemented. We need to invest in better wastewater treatment plants and upgrade them. We need inspectors. And I used to beat on this when I was a county legislator. We need inspectors to go after our sewage treatment plants when you know that more than 20% of them don't meet standards on any given day. And that's a conservative number. Large projects like Ronkonkoma Hub. And there is a debate. It is an undercurrent debate. Our county executive wants Ronkonkoma Hub is a massive mixed-use development. It's a transit-oriented development. And a lot of people are going to live there. He wants to connect it to the Southwest Sewer District. Now, normally you would say that is good, except for two things. They treat the sewage, and guess what happens? Pumped out to the ocean. We need that treated sewage to replenish our aquifer. And that's something we should take a serious look at. A serious look at. So, Steve Balone and I get along on so many things, have a little bit of a disagreement on that, because I thought they should have built a sewage treatment, tertiary sewage treatment plant. Also, so that's a concern to me. It's also a concern that the outfall pipe, we're going to take $400 or $500 million, because that outfall pipe is about 40 years old, and it's failing. And if you sit in the bay, Great South Bay, and you see those little brown bubbles pop up, you know we don't have a lot more time to replace that outfall pipe that goes from the Southwest Sewer District plant, Bergen Point, all the way out, 1 mile out into the ocean. But I don't think we should be pumping that to the ocean. I think we need to replenish our aquifers, which is a huge problem. I'm talking about sewage treatment plants. I used to serve on the Soil and Water Board for Suffolk County. I know our farmers need help in reducing their pesticide and nitrogen runoff. I'm concerned about saltwater intrusion. So I've gone on long enough. I could give you all the rest, but we have some great guys here that are going to talk about it. Thank you for listening. Obviously, there's a lot to do with water, a lot to do, and we need all hands on deck. We need all hands on deck, and we need all voices raised, and we need advocacy more than anything else, because to move the needle, and I've been in government as Steve has, to move the needle, we really got to put that foot to the pedal. Thank you.
And then I have to leave. I just want to mention something that you could have mentioned, but you had so many things to say. When Suffolk County did its Suffolk County Open Space Plan, the most expensive single property was the west side of the Forge River. Ed insisted that the Havens Estate, as it was known, almost 400 acres, be protected and preserved, because he knew even then that the Forge River was in trouble from what was going on the east side of the river. That's where the contamination came from. Imagine how bad it would be if both sides of that river had been developed. But there's a spectacular county park there that you made possible. I just thought I would mention that, because it was, to a very large extent, the centerpiece of the open space program. And it was directed toward water quality improvement of that very river that was in trouble. I also just want to mention, I salute the county legislators are here. They are environmental champions. Remember them, please. Audience, I can say this because I'm not on the ballot this year. Leslie Kennedy is here, and Kara Hahn is here. for whatever it's worth, I have great regard for the environmental record of each of these wonderful representatives. And John Kennedy, our county comptroller, is here. Thank you for all the work you do. Let me just mention one thing, and then I'm going to have to leave. Please vote, if you can, for Proposition 3. It is a clean water initiative. You wouldn't necessarily see that in the wording of the ballot proposition, but it will help stabilize the Adirondack Park, the highest ground in our state from which the Hudson River and other major rivers spring off of the high dome of the Adirondacks. There is no opposition to it. The reason, and it's endorsed by all of the Adirondack advocacy organizations, every single one of them, by the way. There's a lot of furor going on with Proposition 1, and the negativism from there could wash across and defeat Prop 3, which would really be a loss of water quality ultimately for millions of people in our state. And I thank you for letting me just mention that. And please excuse me.
So I'll introduce our next speaker, Ron Busciolano. Sorry. He is a supervisory hydrologist with the U.S. Geological Services New York Water Science Center and is currently supervisor of the Hydraulic Surveillance and Analysis Section for the Farm Program Office. Ron began working for the USGS in 1985 and currently oversees the operation and administration of a multidisciplinary data collection program that encompasses a network of approximately 500 groundwater and surface water stations. This network is the primary source of hydraulic data for the region, which includes Long Island and the 5 boroughs of New York City, one of the most
that water levels are in the lower percentile, so they're either much below normal or near record lows. And this is primarily attributed to the lack of precip that we've had over the past few years, which I'm going to go into a little bit more. We had a lot of rain the last week. We had a little recovery. We're not sure where that's all going to end up. Continue to get more rainfall, and we'll start seeing increases in water levels. But if we look at the past couple of years, we could, this is the Para Hydrologic Drought Index. We could see current conditions in the last couple of years have been well below normal as far as overall precip. And this index is showing that by the bars going down below this midline here. It's the longest period of low levels since the 1960s drought, and that's the 60s drought there, and that was the all-time low levels for most of the wells on Long Island, and it's sort of the benchmark that we go by when we look at low groundwater levels and low stream flow on Long Island. So you can see we have been pretty low, and that is the reason why we're seeing a lot of these declines. Looking a little closer at the precip data, we could see that in 2015, these dark reds here show precip about 20 to 25 inches below normal in some areas. Again, in 2016, we see the same thing. So we had 2 big years of low precip. And now we're getting into a little more wet period, but it's still been below normal. But a lot of the rainfall has been falling during periods of the growing season. So a lot of it hasn't been able to recharge the aquifer. It's been taken up by the plants and transpired back into the atmosphere. And also it was used to replenish the soil moisture deficits that have built up over the past couple of years. So what does this mean? Well, it means that our groundwater levels are declining and our stream flow is declining. This is a trace, the black line is a trace of our Carmen's River gauge at Carmen's River. This gauge has a record of about 75 years. And you can see when we get into these brown levels and these orange levels, these again are the lower percentiles. This means that we're getting really low stream flow at these locations. And actually in 2016, we hit record lows. This last point over here was before this big rainfall that we had over the weekend, but it was after the rainfall that we had the prior week. So we're still pretty low. We expect to see an increase and then potentially a decrease again. But we'll see where this goes with the fall precip season that we have coming up now. Another thing here, lake levels. Lake levels are in contact with the groundwater system. So we're looking at 2 lakes here. This is Lake Ronkonkoma. This is Lake Panamoka. These photos were taken this past weekend. We actually went out and did a drought synoptic at a number of wells and a number of lake levels across Long Island. So you can see these red arrows are pointing to get where normal levels for the lake would be. They're very low. Hopefully, did the Lake Ronkonkoma come up since then? Do you know since?
No, it hasn't been any. Actually, it appears that it's still decreasing.
Still decreasing. So we still have a problem, and hopefully there will be a little rebound as the water moves into these lakes. But we're not sure yet what we're going to see once we get out of this next week or two. So why do we measure stream flow and lake levels? Well, lakes and streams are a window to the water table. They are primarily groundwater fed on Long Island, and they're the first to show trouble in the aquifer system. So it's very important that we monitor these streams and lakes to see what's going on below. Small changes in the water table can produce larger changes in streams. Reduction in stream reach, reduction in stream flow, lowering of lakes. And human-induced stresses like pumping and sewering can really compound these effects. And we've had, effects of pumping and sewering over time in Nassau County. Some streams have to be replenished with water pumped from the groundwater system into the streams. So we have seen these problems before, and we are seeing them in other areas as well. So when you look at these stresses, sewering removes water from the aquifer system, like we were talking about. It actually takes it out of the system, and you can reduce the water table. Reducing the water table reduces stream flow and lake levels. Pumping can create local or regional declines that can induce saltwater intrusion, and we have seen saltwater intrusion occur in many parts of Long Island. If you look at a trend of pumpage for the whole island, this here actually is broken up by aquifer. The blue is the water table aquifer, the red is the Magothy aquifer, and the green is the Lloyd aquifer. But from pre-development to about 1985, there was a general increase in overall pumpage across Long Island. Since then, 1986 to 2003, we see a general leveling off of pumpage, but the pumpage centers have sort of moved east. They've turned pumps off in the city, and they've slowly moved east into Suffolk County, so we have to watch for concerns further east now than we did in the past. So when we talk about saltwater intrusion due to pumping and sewering and some other aspects of human and natural stresses, there are some areas of major concern and some areas that we already know that there is intrusion going on. Great Neck Peninsula, due to overpumping in those areas. Manhasset Neck Peninsula, Bayport. We believe there is some intrusion now in the Lloyd Aquifer in the Long Beach area. And long-term intrusion, which I'll show a better map for in a minute, in southwest Nassau County, where pumping on the mainland has been pulling salt water inland for a number of years. And the USGS monitors this intrusion over time by doing borehole geophysical logs of different wells that we have as outpost wells. And we take that data and produce reports to show how things have changed over time. So when we have all these stresses into the system, we need to develop ways to monitor it and determine how it's going to affect sustainability in the past. And one of the things that the USGS is working with now is this new sustainability of the Long Island Aquifer System program. It's a project that's being funded by the DEC, and what it is it's a project to look at sustainability of the groundwater resources. So the objectives are to improve the current understanding of regional hydrologic framework, including the position and movement of the freshwater saltwater interface, which is very important in many areas of Long Island. Develop a new groundwater flow model of the Long Island Aquifer System. And this flow model then can be used to conduct a comprehensive assessment of groundwater sustainability under changing stress conditions. So we'll be able to plug in multiple scenarios, looking at, if you put a supply well here, what will that do to movement of groundwater? What will that do to potentially movement of saltwater intrusion in areas where there is intrusion concerns? So where are we now in this program? So we had just started last year. We actually pulled together a lot of information from from water authorities, from other agencies, and made a database of all the information for all the wells that are available, the pumpage, and all the other data that we need to incorporate into the model. Now we're actually starting the field work. So what we're doing now is starting to look at areas to do surface geophysics, which are these black dots here. And this map is showing the extent of that saltwater intrusion in Nassau County that I told you about in the Magothy Aquifer. So we're going to go along, and at these black dots, we're going to be putting current into the ground and measuring down into the subsurface about 1,000 feet down, so we can actually see where there might be saltwater intrusion. And this is going to help us guide the well drilling that's going to come next. And the well drilling is very expensive, so we want to know where to put these wells before we actually start the drilling. So this is one way that we're using new technology to look at different aspects of where intrusion might be occurring at this time. Phase 1 of the drilling will be starting later this year, probably in the spring. And these are the wells we're looking at to install for phase 1. It's going to be towards the western part of Long Island. Then phase 2 will work towards the east end. And phase 3, if there will be funding for that, will actually fill in any gaps. And what we're going to do is we're going to take all this information that we're collecting from these wells. We're going to take geological log cores. We're going to collect geophysical logs. And we're going to incorporate that into a new framework for Long Island. And then incorporate that framework into the groundwater flow model. And finally, right now, we are in the development stage of a 24-layer model for all of Long Island. And we're taking other programs, leveraging other programs, modeling programs, and other data programs to incorporate into this model and develop a really robust model. The framework should be ready by the end of this calendar year. And then that's the point at which we start testing, calibrating, and incorporating the new well data as we collect, or as we install new wells across Long Island. And finally, we have a website up for the sustainability project. As we move ahead and do more research and get results out there, we will post all that onto the news section of this website. And I want to just close with one comment, or one or two comments here. I've been with the USGS for over 30 years, and I've noticed these past few years there's been unprecedented coordination efforts between different agencies. And it's been great. We've been working with many, many different agencies, LINAP, New York State DEC, state, county, towns, NGOs, universities, water suppliers, and not only for the sustainability work, but for other ongoing projects. And I think this is the reason why a lot of things are moving forward now. People are talking, working together, not duplicating effort, and getting things done. So I think it's a good thing that we have going now, and hopefully that this continues into the future. So, and that's all I really have. So I think we'll have time for questions later, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, I'll just quickly introduce you.
Okay.
Dr. Chris Gobler is professor in the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences at Stony Brook University. He received his MS and PhD from Stony Brook in the 90s. He began his academic career at Long Island University in 1999. In 2005, he joined Stony Brook University as the Director of Academic Programs for SOMAS at Stony Brook, Southampton campus. In 2014, he was appointed the Associate Dean of Research at SOMAS, and in 2015, he was named the Co-Director of the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology. In 2015, he was also named co-editor of the international peer-reviewed journal Harmful Algae. In 2016, he was named the 40th most influential person on Long Island by the Long Island Press and was given the Environmental Champion Award by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for his efforts. In 2017, he was named the inaugural Endowed Chair of Coastal Ecology and Conservation at Stony Brook University. The major research focus within his lab is investigating how anthropogenic activities such as climate change, eutrophication, and the overharvesting of fisheries alters the ecological functioning of the coastal ecosystems. He published more than 150 manuscripts in peer-reviewed journals and garnered tens of millions of dollars in federal, state, and foundational grant support on these topics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with this great group of panelists. I thought the words of both Senator Engelbright and Supervisor Romay were actually inspirational, and I think really great to have great environmental leaders like them here today. Yeah. And Ronald mentioned we're in this sort of new era all of a sudden where there's this unprecedented activity and interest in water quality, so it's great to see this group addressing that first. And it's actually very exciting to see our politicians, some of them are in the room as well, take great interest in these topics also. So before I jump in, well, I guess I'll start with my first figure. Oh yeah, I gotta hit this guy. Yeah, I'll start with that there. And it's funny, with a panel, a group of 5 speakers, you don't know what the other speaker is going to talk about. And so I thought I carved out my niche real well, assuming the first 3 speakers would hit drinking water quality and such. But actually that hasn't been addressed too much. But this figure, I think, tells you a little bit towards answering that question. So the question is I think the question you posed, is our drinking water safe to drink? Or safe, right? Is that right? Yeah. And so, well, the answer is yes and no. I think on Long Island we've got some, in Suffolk County Water Authority, probably one of the best water distributors in the nation, with incredible testing and continual testing and ensuring that we have excellent water delivered to the homes in Suffolk County, and some great water distributors in Nassau County as well. That being said, I think it's very clear that our water supply is under continual threat, right? And so what we've seen happen here on Long Island in recent decades is that to get good drinking water, we've had to go deeper, deeper and deeper, to the point where no one's really getting drinking water from the surface aquifer anymore. And there's other places we've had to blend drinking water, shut down wells. So the threat to our drinking water is very, very clear. And so, and here we can see Superfund sites, US EPA Superfund sites across Long Island. And there are many. I didn't count them, but I think using the word dozens fits appropriately here, right? And I think we're all aware of the stories that have come up with the Bethpage plume, for example, and some really disturbing trends just this year with regards to 1,4-dioxane, which is shown here, and our next speaker will be talking about that. Anything in red or yellow is a site where there's been a detect red at a level that's approaching what the EPA would deem concerning. But then beyond that, things like perfluorinated compounds, PFAS coming up just this year in places like West Hampton, Hampton Bays, East Hampton, and this is actually, I think, the biggest thing to be aware of and maybe scared of, and that is, for decades we've had chemical companies developing new compounds that we're some of which we're aware of and some of which we're not, and then we've got analytical capabilities that are sort of catching up and being able to detect these compounds. And so I think we'd be foolish to assume that we've gotten through it all now, and we've got 1,4-dioxane and PFAS, and now, well, thank goodness we know about that, we'll take care of that, and then now we're all set. With these sorts of numerous Superfund sites and this distribution of just that one contaminant, I think we can bet that, I think as Supervisor Romaine sort of alluded to, the race is never over and our work won't be done. And we need to keep pushing for that great monitoring by Suffolk County Water Authority and coming up with innovative solutions to make sure we continue to get clean drinking water. So with that being said, I'm going to focus not on these Superfund sites. Our next speaker will talk more about organic contaminants a bit, mostly on 1,4-dioxane. But I'm going to pivot now a little bit with that as my introduction, because that's me covering the things that I thought other people were going to cover. And now I'll talk about the things that I had in mind to talk about, and that is specifically not just nitrogen, but basically groundwater pollution, not from industrial sources, but from us, right? And so the story of Suffolk County, that this county has grown by more than an order of magnitude. There's only 2 counties in New York State bigger than us by population, Brooklyn and Queens, right? So by deduction, you can then figure out we have more people in Manhattan, Bronx, Staten Island. That's a lot of people. If you put Nassau and Suffolk together, we'd be, I believe, the 4th most populous city in the United States. That tells you something. So it's a lot of people and not a big area, and it's having an effect on our groundwater. And I think that I plotted here the nitrogen trend, and that's sort of indicative. We know the punchline here, this is mainly coming from household wastewater, right? And what this tells you, this number of people is now having an impact on our groundwater, which is, of course, our drinking water. And so I can put up a little diagram. This is from the Nature Conservancy here, but this sort of gets very simple cartoon, gets to the heart of the matter. We have lots and lots of people. In Suffolk County, 70% of the homes are not connected to sewage treatment plants, and again, Supervisor Romaine gave us a great introduction to that as to why that may be with the Southwest Sewer District, but the rest of Suffolk County developed without that, so 360,000 of these septic tanks. And it's fascinating in that if we went back 10 years ago, and I said to you, we got a lot of nitrogen in our groundwater, there'd be a big debate. Where's that coming from? And people would say things like, oh, it must be the runoff. I don't even know what that means when you say the runoff, right? Or it must be all the fertilizer. But now we know the debate's totally over. The biggest source, somewhere north of 50%, up to 75%, is coming from septic tanks and cesspools. Fertilizer, of course, both agricultural and household, is another big source as well. And again, that's of nitrogen, but with that going on, we can bet that along with that, within the stream of wastewater, are all the personal care products that we use, and that's like in the laundry detergent and everything else. And in the fertilizer, it's not just the fertilizer, of course, but there's other things like pesticides and herbicides as well. And we're all aware that Long Island's one big aquifer, and I think Ronald showed that very, very nicely in his presentation, and that any water that hits the land is influenced by what's going on in the land, right? And that's either our source of drinking water or it's coming to bear on our coastal waters. And of course, most of the times when I'm speaking, then I go right into the coastal waters. And I'm just going to dip my toe in there because as a marine scientist, I have to do that. But then I'll get back to on subject and stick with drinking water. But I put this map together with help from some other colleagues of what we call water quality impairments on Long Island But the interesting thing about this map is all these dots, we wiped the slate clean as of May of this year. So everything you see here happened between May and the very beginning of September. It's a lot going on. And so the blue are areas of low oxygen, consequence of high nitrogen. And then any of the other colorations are different types of harmful algal blooms that either make toxins that can make people sick or are harmful to our marine life. And you can see there's really not a water body that's been spared by these impairments, be it North Shore, South Shore, Suffolk County, Nassau County, East End. And it's very, very interesting. I continue to think about this. In Nassau County, the water budget's almost even. There's a little bit of excess water, but not nearly the discharge, as we just heard, from land to sea when it comes to the volume of water. Not the case in Suffolk County, where those nitrogen levels keep rising. And probably no coincidence that the preponderance of these impairments are actually in Suffolk County, and also in getting the areas away from that Southwest Sewer District. Okay, so we've got a lot of issues both in our groundwater and drinking water. I am co-director of the Center for Clean Water Technology, which was established by the governor here at Stony Brook in 2015, and we look at what's going on, all these septic systems, our drinking water below our feet, all these important marine resources. Clearly, it's a crisis, but it was first pointed out by President John F. Kennedy that the Chinese symbols for crisis, for danger, the Chinese word for danger is made up of two individual symbols, which individually are the words for crisis and opportunity. So danger, which we clearly have in front of us, it's a crisis, but you can also view that as an opportunity. And as the Center for Clean Water Technology, we see the opportunity in working towards solving this societal problem. So our goal is to, as a public institution, to also work with the private sector, resources in New York State, to come up with technologies that will help restore and protect water quality here in New York State, and really focusing on Long Island. And so for my presentation, I'm going to keep the focus on these septic systems, their effect on groundwater, what we can do. I think you know, but in the event you don't, that in those 70% of homes that aren't hooked up to sewage treatment plants, their wastewater treatment systems look something like this. If your home was built after 1972, you're fortunate to have a septic tank that holds solids and delivers the liquids to a leaching pool, which does a great job of keeping some things out of our groundwater, but actually delivers almost all of the nitrogen directly to our groundwater. It keeps the nitrogen as ammonium. These leaching pools are very, very deep away from the surface, where it's almost always cold. There's very little microbial processing. The ammonium there gets converted to nitrate, and that is very stable in our groundwater. And that is what's led to this trend we've seen in our groundwater in recent decades. I'm going to focus now on an alternative technology that the center is working on. You're probably aware of, Suffolk County has something known as the Reclaim Our Waters Initiative, where they're working very hard to bring in new technologies to replace the old technologies to do a better job of removing nitrogen. And one of the main charges of the center is to work with Suffolk County to do the same thing, and even push the envelope to come up with even better technologies. And I'm sharing one of those with you here, something we call a nitrogen removing biofilter. And I put up these numbers here, 10, 10, 30. And what was fascinating was we first showed those numbers to New York State DEC. This is a true story. After almost 2 years of seeing that number, they said, you guys are doing a great job, but could you solve the problem before 2030? And why are you picking October 10th anyway? Anyway, that is not what 10-10-30 is. Let me explain. 10-10-30 is I wouldn't call it our moonshot goal. It's our overarching goal for these systems. We want systems that can reduce nitrogen to 10 milligrams per liter or lower, so in line with the supervisor's goal as well. We'd like the system to cost $10,000 or less. Conventional systems now are going to cost you somewhere close to that, actually. And we want these systems to last at least 30 years. And we think we have some promise in these systems here. We still have work to do, but you'll see why we're excited about them. To give you a quick sense of how they work, firstly, they take advantage of a technology, a very simple technology called the drain field, which fascinatingly, in the rest of the country, if you're not hooked up to a sewage treatment plant, this is how your wastewater is dispersed. Somehow, that's not the case in Suffolk County. When the US EPA learned that and came to really inspect Suffolk County, they were kind of shocked. So it uses a drain field, and then that drain field underneath it has two simple layers, a layer of sand and a layer of sand mixed with a wood product, sawdust, wood chips, and we're starting to learn it could be any old wood chips, and we've got a lot of wood. I know about the pine beetle taking out the pine barrens, plenty of wood out there to chip up and mix with sand within this layer here. And it then goes through some very simple chemistry. And you get the idea why this could be a cheap technology, right? What am I talking about so far? PVC pipe, sand, wood chips. Okay, there's actually, the only working part is one pump, and that's it. So, and the idea here is through the wonders of chemistry to undergo two simple reactions. Nitrification to turn ammonium into nitrate, and then what we really want, denitrification. Turn that nitrate into nitrogen gas, goes into the atmosphere, where 80% of what we breathe is nitrogen gas. We've installed some of these systems, none yet in Suffolk County, although we think that by the end of the year we'll actually have 3 of them in Suffolk County. But we have taken advantage of a place in Massachusetts where they've installed some of these, they've allowed us to install these systems. It's a test center, one of a kind. And here I'm showing you some pictures of these systems being installed, layer of sand mixed with wood, the top layer there, the drain field, a dispersal system. This is just something called a geomat that goes over each of the drain fields, and then being polished off. I'm just going to show you some very quick results that we think are very exciting, how these systems are performing. So the first one we called a saturated system. It's those two layers again. In this iteration, there's a plastic liner around the bottom one. It keeps that bottom layer wet, and therefore we think it's going to help preserve the wood chip product. And all these systems, you get along with it, a really green lawn. Because you have surface disposal, not only is the wastewater going down and then treated, but actually the lawn actually gets some benefit as well. And that's some of the treatment. Just a small part, but that's one of the byproducts here. And so here's some data from that system. This is the total amount of nitrogen coming into the system. I should say this is nitrogen coming from a wastewater treatment facility, and this is the amount coming out. And note, right off the bat, system right installed, the second data point, this is 10. Second data point at 5. Now, you can see there's some wiggle here. There is seasonality to these systems. In the warm seasons, they perform really, really well. When it's colder, not as well. But on average, this is less than 10 milligrams per liter. And we thought, to be honest with you, we didn't, I should also mention, we put these in Massachusetts. To put them in, we send up 18-wheelers filled with sand from Long Island and wood chips from Long Island, because we wanted to know how would they work with Long Island native materials. And the answer on this one, pretty good. The second iteration is that same sand layer, but then from there, going to a tank filled with wood chips. All right, so it's a little bit different. It's not the 2 layers. It's 1 layer for nitrification, and then a septic tank with wood chips for the denitrification. And so you can sort of see the side view here, nitrification layer. There's the wood chip, called the wood chip box. Again, you get a green lawn as a byproduct. And this thing is ridiculous. 2 milligrams per liter. Last summer, we were having trouble detecting the nitrogen coming out. I see some eyes popping in the back by the supervisor there. Yeah, so we think we're onto something here. And then the third iteration is like the first one, except that bottom system is not lined, so it just percolates out below. Get a green lawn, and it functions really well. Also, it's not as good as the wood chip box. But in season, we're down at about 5 milligrams per liter, and on average lower than 10 milligrams per liter. These have also been made with Massachusetts systems. That's shown here. This is just to show more data. So here's more than 2 years worth of data, and again, maintaining good performance. You can see there's some seasonality, but on average, performance we're pretty happy with. And measuring up well against what Suffolk County has already permitted. So there are 3 systems that have been permitted for Suffolk County that met the standards of 19 milligrams per liter. You can see the hydroaction being the best at about 12 milligrams per liter. So we're right in there, in fact, better than these systems. And beyond nitrogen, which I talked about a lot, I mentioned personal care products, organic contaminants, which we're all really concerned with. And so here's just some results on that. This is percent removal of things like DEET and these other types of organic compounds, some of which are a very serious human health concern. And here's the percent removal. Essentially, close to 99% for all of these compounds in these systems. In the red is what a sewage treatment plant does. All right, so this is performing better than a sewage treatment plant, and this is just 4 compounds. Did I lose the table? The table here somewhere. Oh, there's the table. Here are more 18 compounds in total. You can see we're almost at 99% for all of these. So things like acetaminophen, caffeine, all sorts of compounds. Again, the personal care products, warfarin. So doing a good job with these compounds. And actually, we're now working with Suffolk County. These systems will be installed in Suffolk County starting at the end of this year. We need to get 1 year of pilot data, and once we have that, they're then provisionally approved if they keep performing like this. And we think this could be we're hopeful this could be a widespread solution for Suffolk County. So I'm done. My points are, we have excessive contaminant loading. I'm emphasizing nitrogen, but we need to worry about all the other contaminants for our groundwater. And Stony Brook's taking a leadership role in both identifying water quality impairment and for the clean water technology, Center for Clean Water Technology, coming up with innovative technologies to remove these contaminants from our groundwater and drinking water. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Van Kniesen, and who's going to tell you about 1,4-dioxane and what the center is doing for it. But I guess you have an introduction as well. So.
Dr. Arjun Venkatesan is a research scientist with the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology at Stony Brook University. He is an adjunct professor in the Department of Civil Engineering. He received his PhD at Arizona State University in 2013 and his Master's of Science at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas in 2009 in the field of environmental engineering. His current research focuses on the fate, transport, and treatment of contaminants of emerging concern in natural and the built environment.
Thank you very much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here to share the stage with such wonderful speakers. I should let you know I'm very new to Long Island. I moved like 2 months back, so I've learned a lot from these wonderful speakers about water quality, legislations, and so many things. But the downside to follow up my presentation after all these speakers is most of my slides are already taken. Right? Most of the things that I want to talk about is already touched, so it's going to be a good summary presentation to conclude it, and it's going to be very short too. All right. So probably you saw that figure in Supervisor Romain's presentation as well. I was afraid he was going to talk a lot about it, but I'll continue on it. So as we all know, Long Island, it's a sole source aquifer, so the entire drinking water, almost entire drinking water is coming from under the ground. Downside is if it gets contaminated, we don't have a reasonably alternative drinking water source. So it's important that we keep it clean and treat it well before we drink. So this figure that shows potential contamination, how it actually enters the groundwater. So you can see there's a lot of different sources that can contribute, like runoff from urban runoffs. Then you have landfill sources like industrial sites, like spills and leakages, and septic systems. Dr. Gobler already touched about it. But the three important things that in Long Island, which is contributing to the contamination, is the industrial source, pesticides applications on land, and septic system leakages. These three are the major sources for contamination of our drinking water. And many of you already know about it. The US EPA has a Superfund program where it has federal money to fund to clean up like hazardous waste sites, and there's a list of hazardous waste sites which we call as national priority list, And Dr. Gobler already showed this image with the national priority list. So again, it's a good reminder that there are a lot of sites here. The yellow ones are the current active sites which are being cleaned up or still contaminated, and the green ones are close to deleted sites. It's actually like, we achieved the remedial action, but still a lot of sites are there. And these are based on known contaminants. So these are based on regulated contaminants. On top of this, then we have this new term called contaminants of emerging concern. So what are these contaminants of emerging concern? That's the first question that's going to pop up. These are chemicals that are not regulated correctly, but they occur in the environment. But there are several unknowns associated with. That's the reason we are not able to set up a regulation for these contaminants. We don't know how frequently they occur in the environment, at what levels they occur in the environment, and we don't completely understand the risks associated with these chemicals to humans and the environment. More than 40,000 organic chemicals have been identified as contaminants of emerging concern. Okay, a lot of contaminants, and we should know that each year in the United States we generate 2,000 new chemicals. Each year we generate 2,000 new chemicals, so it's going to keep adding to this list of contaminants where we don't understand the risks. But research clearly shows one of the major sources for these contaminants in drinking waters and surface water is wastewater discharges, like wastewater effluents or leaking from like cesspools and septic tanks. These are the major contaminant sources. So let's take a step back. Think about it. If wastewater is the major source, who's generating the wastewater? It is us. So many of these chemicals actually comes from us. We actually use these chemicals through various products that we use day to day as personal care products, like lotions. If anyone uses antibacterial soap, it has like contaminants that can last in the environment forever. And recently the FDA actually banned some of these chemicals because it was concerned to the environments as well. So we also contribute a lot without our knowledge to contamination in the environment. So with respect to our center, so I also represent the Center for Clean Water Technology. Dr. Gobler already mentioned a lot about the on-site wastewater treatment system and nitrogen removal. This effort and initiative is more towards drinking water side. So our center is trying to develop novel technologies and assess how effective they are in removing and tackling these emerging contaminants that is coming as an upcoming problem. The primary objectives of this initiative is we provide grants support to water utilities to install novel pilot treatment techniques, and we work with them collaboratively to evaluate the efficacy of these pilot treatment systems in removing the emerging contaminants. And we also perform research. We try to develop novel and technologies which can enhance the removal of these contaminants in water sources. So these are the main objectives of the center. And we already heard about this contaminant, and our center initial focus is on 1,4-dioxane. So I'm a chemist, so I'm going to give a little bit of chemistry, so please bear with me. So 1,4-dioxane, it's an industrial solvent. It's been widely used. It's as a stabilizer, purifying agent. It's also a byproduct in many of the manufacturing processes, and it's also present in like some of the personal care products. So it has a wide number of sources. The major problem with this contaminant is a likely human carcinogen, right? So current regulation, there are no federal regulation, unfortunately. There's no maximum contamination level in drinking water. However, the US EPA has developed a health advisory level of 0.35 parts per billion in drinking water. That is equivalent to like increasing the risk of cancer in 1 in a million population. The New York State, however, has an MCL which is at 50 parts per billion. Is right a little bit high, not a little bit, an order of magnitude higher than what is the concern level. But there's a council that is formed right now, from my knowledge, and they're working towards developing a better regulation for 1,4-dioxane. So what is the issue with 1,4-dioxane? Why is it a problem right now? So it all comes to chemistry. So this chemical is a tough one. So some of its properties makes it very difficult for us to remove this contaminant from water. It is highly miscible in water. That is very soluble. It just like spreads, and you cannot really contain this contaminant. It spreads in the groundwater very quickly. It has a low vapor pressure. That is, it doesn't evaporate quickly. So, like common water treatment technique like air stripping that removes volatile organic compounds, it does not work with 1,4-dioxane. It has a high boiling point, meaning it needs high energy and high heat for it to like vaporize, and it is not like economically feasible to do distillation to clean your water. It has low sorption coefficient. That is, it cannot stick to solids very easily. It likes to stay in the water phase. So a typical treatment system can have like an activated carbon that actually removes contaminants by sticking to it. 1,4-dioxane doesn't work efficiently that way. And another big problem is it's resistant to biodegradation. Even microorganisms, which are known to eat many of these contaminants and remove from groundwater, they don't work effectively on dioxane, so it's resistant to it. So all these properties about dioxane makes it very difficult for us, the water utilities, to handle this chemical and treat it. However, research has shown there is one effective treatment of 1,4-dioxane, which is advanced oxidation process. There are different configurations for this treatment system, but in theory, what it does is it creates this chemical, a hydroxyl radical, which is a very, very strong oxidant. It can attack anything, any organic chemical surrounding it, and break it down into simpler forms, which is safer to like handle. So this is the hydroxyl radical. So the research has shown as this is very effective in degrading 1,4-dioxane. It also enhances biodegradation. People have used a combination of advanced oxidation process to first break down the structure of the chemical, and then the microorganisms or the bacteria can do its own job and degrade it too. This is a typical setup for a UV, which is ultraviolet radiation in combination of hydrogen peroxide, which is a chemical added to it. This is an advanced oxidation process system. You can pump out your contaminated groundwater, add this peroxide chemical to it, you mix it, and send it to a UV reactor. This is essentially like tube lights with UV radiation, which creates these hydroxyl radicals, and then it breaks down the chemical, and it's followed by a filtration system to remove it. So when we say degradation of 1,4-dioxane and using advanced oxidation process, it's not so simple. Like you can summarize in one equation saying that it degrades and produces carbon dioxide in water. But I'm going to scare you all with a little bit of chemistry. But what exactly happens here is it goes through a number of different steps. It forms different structures, different chemicals. More chemicals are broken down to get more like chemicals. So we need to understand if it is forming anything more toxic than what it is already. So that's where we can play our part. We're trying to figure out how this chemical is breaking down, whether it's completely breaking down into safe materials, and how we're going to track it. So that's one of the research that the center is doing on this aspect. So other considerations are, of course, we need to consider the energy consumption. We can't put in a system that takes up a lot of energy in it. So we're looking at energy consumptions, looking at other contaminants which could be formed unintentionally during the treatment process. We need to, of course, remove the chemicals that we add to the system so that it does not corrode the distribution system or we do not get exposed to it, and so on. So all these will be addressed. We are trying to address by doing controlled experiments in lab and also in a pilot scale treatment system in collaboration with the water utilities. So some of the ongoing efforts, so we recently issued out a request for proposals to all water utilities, and they're going to submit proposals to us, come up with their own technology or use the existing advanced oxidation process technology, and they're going to build a pilot scale treatment system to see how efficient it is in removing dioxins. And we are going to work collaboratively with them, and we're going to study the byproducts, or the unknown contaminants that might be unintentionally formed during the treatment process, and we're going to evaluate how effective these treatment systems are by working with these water utilities. And of course, we are also going to develop new methods. We're going to try to develop methods which is in tandem with EAP to enhance the removal of 1,4-dioxane, and we'll be doing our own experiments here at Stony Brook University. So that's one contaminant that I gave a very detailed like objectives that the center is trying to attack. But the other, we are also trying to proactively focus on other emerging contaminants. And one of the contaminants that came up with some of the speakers are the perfluorinated compounds, PFAS and PFOA. So I just wanted to spend one slide on it to tell what these chemicals are, where does it actually come from. So PFAS and PFOA are actually a part of a larger group of contaminants. They're called perfluorinated compounds or perfluoroalkyl substances. This is a structure. You have a lot of fluorine, carbon, but you have it's just chemistry. But this chemical have been used more than 60 years, like in the industry. It's a oil repellent and water repellent. So anyone use like a Teflon nonstick, this chemical is there in that coating. So you end up, probably many of you, or if not all, already have this chemical in our blood. The Center for Disease Control actually gets samples from humans, blood, serum, and so on, test for contaminants, and they show these two chemicals. They're in the top, it's been detected, and we're already exposed to some of these contaminants. But the big problem now is also present in our groundwater and drinking water sources. With all these concerns, of course, in 2000 and 2002, there was one big manufacturing company that was producing a lot of this chemical, tried to phase out these chemicals, tried to stop its production and use in products. It's 3M, by the way. And that actually showed some changes in its contamination level. In 2006, globally, they were trying to contain the generation and production of these chemicals and use of these chemicals in products. But today, there are manufacturers who use these chemicals. There are products that has these chemicals in them, and it is being released into the environment. The EPA, US EPA has recently put an advisory level of 70 parts per trillion. So if you remember the level, what the 1,4-dioxane was, it was 350 parts per trillion. This is 5 times lower than that. So it has much lower level, higher treatment goal for water utilities, I believe. But there are available treatment techniques which can remove 90% of these contaminants from water. But our center is going to focus on other alternative and advanced treatment systems to more effectively remove these, not just these contaminants, but look at a wide range of contaminants as well. So that, I think that's the last slide that I had. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
So we're going to open it up to some questions. The supervisor, if you can come back up here, so we can take some of your questions. Pop back up, but go ahead, Karen. Go ahead. Start.
Hi there. I have a couple of things. First, I'm really concerned. I don't know. I'm sure most people here read the article maybe 2 weekends ago about the Environmental Protection Agency and decreased oversight. Not that we had great oversight to begin with, but the trend towards decreasing regulation and decreasing oversight. And you mentioned 2,000 new chemicals a year, and how are we on top of this? Our health department already tests for more chemicals than we are required to, but we only test for about 365, and there are 2,000 every year that are created, and it's very, I'm going to go through a whole bunch of things here. It's very concerning, the trend at the national level, at the EPA, to me, and I know the state is trying to pick up, and the state is late to the game, but on the 1,4-dioxane issue, working on the state standard, which hopefully we can take over where the EPA is leaving off. But so I'm hoping you can comment a little bit on that, and maybe suggestions for localities, if anything. Also here, we're at Stony Brook University. There's a hospital, a regional center for a whole bunch of different treatments, and the things that the effluent, even though they go through a sewage treatment plant, it does get pumped into Port Jefferson Harbor, and it does include things like radioactive chemicals and other concerning items. And so, I don't know if you can speak to that at all. And then, Chris, maybe if you could talk a little bit about the ecological standard for nitrogen versus drinking water standard. I've been told, 10 is the drinking water nitrogen standard, but I've heard 0.5 ecological standard. You agree with that, or should we even be obviously technology's not there yet, but we really need to be shooting not a goal of 8, but the an ecological goal that protects our smallest creatures in our ecosystem, and you can really care for that. So that's a whole lot of things. I'm sorry.
I'll start. I'm sure other people have things to jump in on. The first thing you got a lot to say, but the first thing I'll say is what just echoing what the supervisor, actually what the Assemblyman said. What's happening at the federal level is I'll just use the word concerning. And so, but I honestly think, I don't think that's a reason to, you can complain about it, or you could do what I think the state is doing. And just, it's time for states to lead. And I think, we can all be grateful we live where we do. Because I think, the leadership from the state level down to people like yourself and the legislature are taking leadership roles and saying, well, EPA can do what they're going to do. We can't fix that right now, but we can address what we can. And so I think that's what we just need to do is continue to have superb leadership at the state level on down.
And I hope we can have a dialogue, so that it's really clear that it's not happening at the national level and that we need to take over, and like we did on microbeads, like we did on, a number of things, Suffolk County has led the way for decades. Supervisor Romaine, having been in the legislature for many of those, leading roles that we played. So, I hope we can continue a dialogue, and I'm sure Legislator Kennedy agrees that if we can, take over where it really should be the federal government's job, but if we can lead here and we can have a dialogue with you about what, whether it's banning or managing or regulating or monitoring, those things, we want to have that dialogue.
Yeah, and that's where we're now.
I would simply respond by saying you're absolutely right on the money. But again, you're in government, I'm in government, I know one thing. All issues of government are issues of money. And while the town is financially stable, the balanced budget, a surplus, and AAA bond rating, the county is close to bankruptcy. So how does the county step up to play a leadership role if it can't get itself back to fiscal health? And unfortunately, many of the issues you deal with as a government leader deal with fiscal stability. Because if you can't fund something that is so necessary, regardless of what the national government is doing, you're not going to be able to do it here on the local level.
Thanks, Ed, but we can ban and we can regulate and we can do things.
Yes, you
and
can.
we're not next to bankruptcy, but thank you. And that's why we need new revenues, and we have been going for those.
So, and not just on the nitrogen standard, the good news is that what you said was correct. 10 milligrams per liter of nitrate is the human health standard, and therefore, according to US EPA, and therefore we have to make sure our drinking water is below 10 milligrams per liter. Most of our wells are, there's some that are not. On average, the county is like around 4 milligrams per liter, but that's an average of some being close to 0 and some being quite high.
Makes it.
Yes. 0.5 is what you want to get in the estuary, but here's the good news. Our estuarine waters, by and large, are about 90% marine/ocean water, if you understand what I'm saying. So the ocean salinity is 31. Our estuaries, for example, go north to Long Island Sound from here, it's about 25. This is parts per thousand, which means it's 80 to 90% ocean water. And so to achieve that 0.5, anyway, I'm just going to draw a curve up here, but it's getting a little late on a Friday night. Suffice to say, if we can get the levels down to, say, 2 milligrams per liter
That's what I
or so in the groundwater, that will keep the estuarine waters below 0.5. And again, it's because of that mixing of the ocean water, which doesn't have, it's not that it has no nitrogen, but it's much, much lower. And so that, thankfully then, for marine waters, because of that mixing, we don't need to achieve, we don't need to get down to 10, but we need to get lower than we are right now.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time and efforts. I grew up on Long Island, and I'm a local environmental lawyer. I have children who I'm raising here, and I'm gravely concerned about their future sources of water. And so I had just a couple of pragmatic questions, practical questions. So you said $10,000 for the cost, which sounds wonderful. So I remember the first thing I had to do when I bought my home in Long Island that was built in 1957 was replace the septic tank that no one told me I needed to worry about. I spent like $25,000 doing that. That was 13 years ago. So, but $10,000, does that estimate the cost of labor? Because this looks like a very labor-intensive process.
So let me be perfectly clear.
Yeah.
10,000 is our goal.
Right.
Okay. We're not there yet, and
Okay.
if we had to install one of these systems now, we'd probably be more than your 25,000.
Okay.
And partly
Well, that's
because
what I have been hearing,
and
so I
partly
wanted to-
because these have never been done, right? And so when you install these, you're coming with people. The labor. It's like thinking about an assembly line. If you're building just one thing, it costs a lot more. But when you're building a lot of them,
Okay.
and people learn how to do it, and you develop an industry, the costs come down.
Right. It's a learning curve.
It's
Right.
a learning curve. I can tell you, just very briefly, the other systems Suffolk County have right now that they are starting to be installed. It is costing about $25,000. And so that's for everything. As engineer, design it, install it, buy the system, the whole thing.
Which is within the current cost realm of the
It's
current
very, a
system
lot of it's
today.
site specific. It's depending how, what your property's like. There's some easy installs, so it sounds like you had a more difficult install than average when you had to
Yeah.
redo your system.
Or I lived in a zip code that they wanted to take advantage of. Okay, and then then also, I guess my question, I'm a Nassau County resident, right? So a lot of the information data points are Suffolk County specific, and I've been working with local towns to try to help them put together local waterfront development plans, etc. And one of the things that I'm hearing, among people, small circles, people who've been tackling these issues a lot longer than I am, certainly smarter than I am, their concern is, at least confusion. It's not really concern. It's how do I identify which homes that these systems would be the most beneficial for? In other words, and I guess my question is it possible to vision a survey process of existing homes in Nassau and Suffolk that would help us identify this home would best be served by having a new system, and for this home, an existing traditional system would just be fine? Is that
So in
possible?
good news, it's actually happening right now.
Okay.
So there's the Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan is being implemented by the New York State DEC. It has many facets to it, but one of the facets is called the Sub-Watersheds Plan. It's being done for Suffolk County and for Nassau County. Suffolk County is going first, but they're doing exactly what you're talking about. They're breaking down Suffolk County into literally 200 individual watersheds and looking at the nitrogen loading to those watersheds. They're looking at the water quality within the surface waters, and then they're pulling those together and trying to understand which of the areas should be the highest priority for upgrading based on the benefit to surface waters. And I should also say it's getting done for Nassau County as well. So it's a great idea that great minds think alike, and DEC is.
My last question would be, we regulate in this country like drugs before they're administered to people, right? They go through lengthy FDA process, right? Is there currently a federal process for investigating the safety of chemicals before they're released to the public? There is?
There is. There's something called the TSCA, the Toxic Substances Control Act. They actually perform all safety tests on new chemicals that are being introduced before they are put into manufacturing products and so on. So the
Okay.
US EPA looks over this effort.
So 1,4-dioxane has gone through this TSCA process,
I believe so.
and yet it's still now causing potential cancer issues for residents in Long Island. Okay, so there's a.
Well, I can just jump in there. I wouldn't say it's causing cancer issue. I'm a cancer biologist, so
Okay.
as far as I know, there's nothing reported that is linked to cancer. Saying that it's a potential carcinogen
Okay,
is very
so,
different.
and that was
than-
and that's where some of, I think, people who are slow on buying into environmental causes, they tend to see certain things written and say, well, that's a red flag, maybe. So I wanted to just understand that concept, which is, what we're discussing now, this fine line between known carcinogen, definitely, and then potential. So if anyone can help me understand,
Isn't it a probable, or is it a?
Well, there are levels. There's possible, there's probable, and there are known carcinogens, and these are often based on animal studies, sometimes on human data, human studies. When you're saying probable or possible, those are not. There may be some evidence in lab studies that they have links, and again, dosage matters. So it's a question of that particular chemical may have at high doses could be linked to cancer, may cause cancer in mice or rat studies, but it's unclear if it's actually causing it in humans.
Thank you. All right, excellent answer. Thank you, everybody.
And it's also hard to rule out cause and effect. I mean, it's hard to link a cause and effect.
With synergistic.
We have a question.
I would just like to contribute to what was previously said as far as the toxicological assessment of new contaminants or ones that haven't been identified. Those are extremely expensive studies that take a very long time. If we look at the polyfluoridated compounds that were pumped out, that took a tour de force to even change the political field to consider these things as toxic, even though that was known for 70 years by the company while it was dumping it into the watershed. So the fact is that we need to sponsor those types of toxicological studies that are done by independent researchers. And Stony Brook is one of these places where this type of research gets conducted. But recently, a lot of departments have been getting cut and combined. We have pharmacology, pathology, anatomy, physiology. All those departments are getting combined into a single department to save money. It's getting harder and harder to secure that type of funding to do this type of unbiased research. So it's a multifaceted problem where cuts on levels such as the NIH trickle down to findings like this. But I also have one more question for Chris, which is more of a technical question. On the diffuser tanks, it seemed that your levels were like 18 inches for the sand and 18 inches for so microbiological activity at that level is still very possible. I'm very likely, I imagine that's why the efficiency goes down during the summer. What is the rate of degradation of the wood chip layer?
That's a good question, and actually we don't know precisely. Theoretically, it should be decades. One of the reasons we have, if you recall, it sounds like you have good recollection of that presentation, we had the version that was lined, right? So that was lined to keep those wood chips in water, and I always use the analogy of when I went to Denmark once, and I went to one of the Danish fjords. And a Danish fjord is a water body where at the bottom there's no oxygen year-round because of the way the fjord is built. And they raise ships sometimes, 1,000 years old, made of wood, and they're actually almost fully intact. With the bottom line being, if there's no oxygen, wood degrades at a very, very slow rate. Now, I'm not guaranteeing these things will last 1,000 years, but that's the reason for the liner. Now, the second iteration, or another iteration, that box system we have, the idea there is that the box should literally just be opened and the chips be pumped out and put new chips in, if and when they do degrade. And that, again, the reason we're doing these 3 different systems is because these have never really been tested we've thought about it. They've been pilot tested in some places, but not widespread use. So we're trying these three approaches to see which is going to be the most pragmatic. And so at least in the line system and in the box system, there's actually no concerns because the box will replace from the line system. We think that's decades, but maybe even more. The unlined system, it's unknown. Again, in theory, some of the theory tells us it could be 100 years, but we haven't done these systems, so we don't know for sure.
Is there a microbiological contribution to the denitrification step?
That is strictly biological. That's a biological process entirely.
We have two questions of it. Go ahead.
I haven't been active in this discipline in a while, actually. Ron and I crossed paths about 30 years ago. He joined the Geological Survey in '85, and I left the same office in '86. But back then, one of the things we talked about was the possibility of treating the water as it was coming out of the ground at the wellhead, presuming that the groundwater at some point would become contaminated, and that the way we would provide clean drinking water would be to treat it as we pumped it out of the ground. It seems 30 years later that we still have not quite come to that point in the groundwater system, which is a good thing. But I was wondering if there's any, if there's a component or consideration of that scenario still in the discipline, in the engineering of groundwater management. So assuming that at some point we're not going to be able to control the contamination with such a concentrated population on Long Island, and at some point the groundwater is going to get to the point where we can't just pump it out of the ground and distribute it. I'm not talking about chlorination, I'm talking about carbon filtration or whatever, high level filtration.
I believe majority of the water that's being pumped is somehow treated before going to the distribution system. So right now in the Suffolk County, they use a granular activated carbon filter system where they remove most of these contaminants. They chlorinate the water before sending it to distribution. So
chlorine has been common for 65 years I've been around.
So it is being treated, but the level of treatment because of these new, persistent contaminants is what's causing the issue for drinking water occurrence of these contaminants. But they are being treated with filtration or air stripping and so on.
It depends on the area. Some areas are treated more than others, depending on what they find in the groundwater system. So there is treatment going on. The further east you go, probably less treatment is needed because it's more pristine. Further west you go, you probably have more treatment going on at this time.
One other observation, I was surprised at this gentleman's remarks. I grew up in the town of North Hempstead in Nassau County, and even 50, 60 years ago, they were no longer issuing building permits to replace cesspools. They were requiring you to tie into the sewer system. And I was under the impression that there weren't very many individual septic systems in Nassau County.
My whole block, that's all.
Really?
I think just a couple more.
Yeah, I just have a fairly simple curiosity question. If anybody can answer if there are plasticizers detected in our drinking water, if that's a problem, if there's any efforts to do any research or removal of those, anything about them at all. Phthalates.
Not to my knowledge, I haven't really explored or searched on that issue, but thank you for bringing it. Maybe that's something that I'm going to look into. My own curiosity.
Hi, my name is Madeline Gamache. I'm here with Citizens Climate Lobby. We're very interested in all aspects of the environment. I have a question for Dr. Gobler, and that is a kind of a multiple question. How many years can you anticipate that this system, say it's successful in the experiments that you're doing, how many years before it becomes available on a level that homeowners can actually transfer to this?
So we need 1 year of pilot data in Suffolk County, and then we have what's called provisional approval, in which case they'll approve several dozens, and then from that we need, I can't remember if it's 1 or 2 years of data, and then it's widespread thereafter.
You're talking about maybe 5 years?
No, I think 2 to 3 once we put this in.
So that's pretty soon. My other question related to that is, has there been any talk about funds that would assist homeowners in being able to install these,
Yeah.
especially homeowners who would not have the means to do this?
Suffolk County has a really great rebate program that they is currently available. If you were to go to reclaimourwaters.info,
Okay.
but you'd see the details. I think they have about a $10,000 rebate system. The even more amazing thing is in the eastern towns, the 5 eastern towns in Suffolk County, they just approved. They have something called the Community Preservation Fund. 2% of home sale tax goes into a fund. 80% was used for acquiring open space, but 20% is used for clean water initiatives. And so those towns, East Hampton and Township leading the way, are also going to have rebate programs. And it doesn't help you probably further west here, but the town of East Hampton think they can replace all their septic systems on that system alone.
Really?
The
Because
governor
they get
also,
a ton of money out of the CPF.
Yes.
the governor recently signed a bill that approved, it's called the New York Septic Replacement Fund, but every county executive needs to kind of sign up for participation. So it was just signed last Monday by the governor, and that's going to make a lot of money available for these types of replacement systems, up to $10,000 per household.
I'm
which
sure
would be-
Mr. Malone will sign up.
Yeah, which will be a significant portion. So,
Yes.
you know, residents in Nassau County and Suffolk County really should write or email their county executives to ask them to sign up for that.
I just want to make one more comment as a private citizen, and that is, citizens are still not taking personal responsibility for making changes that they need to make in terms of their personal polluting of our environment. And some of the things that you mentioned were antibacterials. Nobody should be using antibacterial soap anymore. The medical community has come out to say that this is actually spurring the growth of antibacterially resistant thank you, antibiotic resistant. Liz, I'm getting out faster. I know somebody else wants to talk. The Teflon coating. Why are people still buying these things that we know are contaminating the environment, or all other things? And can universities and our governments have some kind of better or more forceful instructional program or banning? Why can't that happen to help this along? And I would appreciate anybody's comment on that.
We
Thank
have
you.
a federal system of government, which means that we have multiple layers of government. The federal and the state have the ability to ban, and under certain circumstances, the county has the ability to ban. Towns per se don't deal with those issues, but
Okay.
counties for some items, states for more, and feds for all deal with that system.
Can you
So-
give an example of something that's been banned by Suffolk County environmentally recently?
I'll let legislative Kennedy.
Years ago, phosphates.
Phosphates, right. Hey,
The bees, right, okay.
people used to drive into Nassau County to get laundry detergent, because the only thing you could buy in Suffolk County in the early '70s, and I remember this, was Ivory Snow. Because they banned all the phosphates in Suffolk County.
Excellent, I like it.
But then they
Thank you.
changed all the chemicals for the
Right.
laundry. But there was a period of about 5 to 10 years where all you could buy is Ivory Snow in Suffolk County.
I think we'll take just one more in the back.
It was more of a comment. The plastics ban that the county attempted to put in place a couple of decades ago.
Plastic
There was
bags.
combat over that.
Yeah.
The county asserted that it had authority to ban it, but interstate commerce, which is a federally regulated aspect of our capitalist system, shall we say, came in, and there were battle royales and court decisions and things like that, and the plastic bill eventually had some problems with it. What it boils down to is commerce has a very, very powerful impact on what shows up here, and often government is very, very reactive, as we're seeing with a lot of these chemical stuff. The government is reactive and can't ban sometimes, can try and limit, can try and ban, but there's a hard road to go down.
Just one more quick
I just want to know, I'm an elementary STEM teacher and I have a robotics team, and the first Lego League theme is hydrodynamics, and they have to find a solution to a problem within the human water cycle. And the 11-year-old girls on my team want to do aquifers. So which one of you guys should I hit up after? You're the guy I need to talk to. So.
We already have someone working with another group for the Lego group, the Lego team. So come to me, I'll set you up. Yeah.
Thank you.